So in 2012, the Minnesota Vikings had a tremendous turnaround season under head coach Leslie Frazier. They won 10 games and they made the playoffs behind Adrian Peterson's MVP style performance. There were two schools of thought with the Vikings heading into 2013. Either A, they were going to get a little bit better, or B, they were going to come crashing back down to earth. And it was more of B with 2013. They ended up finishing 5-10-1. The Vikings started off very sluggishly and slow, and we're never going to be able to recover ultimately. It led to head coach Leslie Frazier being fired, and that ultimately, I guess, was the right decision. You might not want to necessarily see people get fired, but at a certain point in time, it's a results driven business. It just didn't work out, and the Vikings organization didn't feel that it was best for their long term direction. So be it. When you look at this team, and how they played in 2013. The defense was really, really bad. Now, this was one thing with the struggles at the quarterback position on the offensive side of the ball. If the defense still would have played well and maybe would have helped kept them in more games and they maybe would have won another game or two, I bet Leslie Frazier might be back for 2014. His seat might be a little warm, but he would still be back. But when you have a defensive minded head coach with a defense that is performing very, very poorly, which the Vikings defense did for pretty much the majority of the 2013 season, and you go 5-10-1 when you factor in the struggles, in particular at the quarterback position, it's not hard to realize why the head coach ultimately gets the axe. And it's time for a change in Minnesota. It's time for them to bring in somebody with some NFL head coaching experience if possible. And, as of this, me recording this, I don't see who the Vikings have hired yet. So I'm speaking as if the Vikings haven't already hired their head coach. By the time this is uploaded, they may already well have hired one, but they haven't as of yet. When you look at the offensive side of the ball, the quarterback situation was a mess this year. Christian Ponder, I think, ultimately in his third season, he was given a chance to show if he could do it or not. Well, he couldn't stay healthy, and when he did stay healthy, he was definitely nothing to write home about, nothing special. Too inconsistent, too many turnovers, too little production. It's time to move on from the Christian Ponder experience. When you have to go to guys like Matt Castle, ugh, Matt Castle definitely isn't the answer. The Vikings got so desperate with their quarterback situation that they tried to sign Josh Freeman off the scrap heap. They gave him $3 million to come in after he had been late to meetings and everything else. And he put up one of the most horrendous performances you will ever see on Monday Night Football in that game against the Giants. But that's not the only reason I feel like Leslie Frazier should have been fired. You had a relatively lackluster season from big money free agent acquisition Greg Jennings. But what I focus on is on the other side of the ball. They took Cordero Patterson in the first round. Now, this is a Vikings team that went 10-6 last year, brought in 3 first-round draft picks in Sharif Floyd and Xavier Rhodes for the defense, and then Cordero Patterson to be their big explosive playmaker on the offensive side of the football. And this, to me, crystallizes why the Vikings sucked in 2013. And this ultimately, to me, epitomizes why Leslie Frazier did indeed deserve to be fired. You have Cordero Patterson, a 6'3", 6'4" motherfucker who can fly. And you can't find ways to get the ball in his hands on a more consistent basis. Well, he doesn't know his route tree. He struggles to do this, and he doesn't run block very well. Who gives a shit? You put the goddamn ball in his fucking hands, and when he does, big things happen, and he scores touchdowns. He scored a few rushing touchdowns this year, a few receiving touchdowns this year. Look at his touchdown to touch ratio. It's got to be out there. It's got to be way up there. And why is that? Because the guy is an explosive fucking playmaker. Look at what he did in the return game, even in a league now that is designed to not allow a lot of kick return prowess because of moving the ball up and some of the other rules changes. And Patterson still broke a couple to the house this year. You throw in his playmaking ability as a pass catcher and as a runner. How in the hell did you not figure out a way to get the damn ball in his hands more? How did you not figure out a way to get him on the field more? You spent a first-round pick on this guy to bring him in to be an explosive playmaker. He definitely gave you plenty of evidence to support just that you were right, that he could be an explosive playmaker, but then you didn't unleash the motherfucker. Unbelievable. He was one of the 10 best talents, in my opinion, in all of this past year's draft. And you can't find a way to get him on the field maybe more than a third of the time. on the offensive side of the football. Ridiculous. And that's ultimately why Leslie Frazier, with all the other reasons, deserved to be fired. And the Vikings need to really restructure how they do their business, because when you spend a first round pick and you traded several other picks to get back into the first round to take Patterson, you don't deploy him, you don't utilize him, and all he's doing is making big plays when you do utilize him, it just makes you wonder how intelligent the people involved with the Vikings organization really are. And that's just the way it is. When you look at this team, this is Adrian Peterson's team. But Adrian Peterson's played 7 years in the NFL now. So he's what, a 28-year-old running back? How many peak years is AP really going to have? What a shame it would be for the Vikings over the next 2 or 3 years to continue to suck and waste the rest of AP's prime career, one of the greatest running backs in the history of the NFL, and to see him waste away on a bad, mediocre organization. This is the last year of them being in the Metrodome. They go for a couple of seasons, I believe, to play at the University of Minnesota Stadium before they get their new stadium. And it'll be a shame that by the time they get to that new stadium, AP will be at the end of his days as a top-flight NFL running back, especially if they don't do anything in the next couple of years to hurry up and make themselves contenders and winners. And the first component of that is going to be finding the right head coach. They need to find an offensive-minded head coach, preferably somebody with some previous head coaching experience. They should be strongly going after somebody like maybe a Ken Wisenhunt, although it doesn't mean they can't go after a coordinator like a Jay Gruden, or a Darrell Bevell, somebody along those lines. And then they must, in this draft, they must find their quarterback of the future, who is going to be better than Christian Ponder could ever imagine. They need to find a quarterback that can stay healthy, a quarterback that's more consistent, a quarterback that can make better decisions and make more big plays and just has more talent than Christian Ponder. Because the fact of the matter remains, back in 2011, Christian Ponder was a reach as a 12th overall pick. The Vikings felt they desperately needed a young quarterback, which they did, and they reached for one. And sometimes that's the nature of the beast in the business, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But ultimately, when you fail with a quarterback that you took in the first round, it can potentially set your organization back 5 years. You figure now Ponder's been there 3 years. They made one playoff appearance, but look at where they're at now. It could potentially take another 2 to 3 years, even if they do draft the right quarterback in the first round this year, to get back to being relevant in a competitive team again, a real competitive playoff team. That's a shame. Like I said, especially because you don't know how much longer AP is going to play. You got decisions to make on the defensive side of the ball, namely whether or not you're going to be able to bring back Jared Allen, whether or not he wants to come back, whether or not you want to bring him back. A lot of questions involving this Vikings organization going forward into 2014. But make no mistake about it, the Minnesota Vikings must, in this offseason, identify who that rookie quarterback is going to be, who's that young quarterback that they're going to draft, who is that going to be. They have to identify him, and then they have to do whatever it takes to go get him. Because they found out that even if you have talent in other places, on the offensive line, on the outside, at running back, some talent on defense, even though the defense didn't play all that well in 2013, if you don't have that quarterback to be that glue that you can count on to start every game, that can make big plays, manage situations, that can be your bedrock and your foundation, you really ultimately have nothing. So what the Vikings found out in 2013. They must, and I emphasize again, must find the right offensive-minded head coach to lead them, and then find that young quarterback that will work well in that new head coach's system. And maybe in 2015, the Vikings can be a competitive playoff contending team once again.